Hello everyone, Mindy Beverly with you here today with Sonoran Desert Crafts. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to create a mini album using the contents from the newest kit for the March kit from Sonoran Desert Crafts. You can find the kits at www.sonorandesertcrafts.com. And they come with these super fun papers. This is this awesome paper pack with 24 sheets of 6x6 double-sided papers. They are great quality, beautiful printing. So we're going to be using those in the kit. Also, I'm going to be using, for this mini album, the twine, the green and white twine that comes in the kit, as well as the little charm. We're also going to be using some of the sequins from the sequin mix that comes in the kit. I did in one of the previous videos, if you are a subscriber or purchase the kit, you got the coloring video on how to color up these little cutie stamps, which is right here. I went ahead and I colored him up with Copic markers and cut him out. I also stamped the little sentiment from the set, Lucky Gnome, onto a 1 1/4 inch square by 1 1/4 inch square. So I have that ready to go for a mini album as well. We're also going to be using the stencil that comes in the kit. It's this really fun scene building stencil. You have that cloud border at the top. You have shamrocks all throughout, and in the bottom you have a fun grass border. So we're going to be using that to create our scene. The stamps, again, as I said, I already stamped and colored those up. And then the dies, I went ahead and cut out with the dies. I have here the little rainbow. I cut all this from white watercolor paper, so you're going to need one of the rainbow. You are going to need the two different larger shamrocks, so I cut those out from the white watercolor paper. You're going to need one of the clouds, and then one of the little, we have the little handle, one of those cut from white watercolor paper, and then from gold pattern paper or just gold shimmer paper, I went ahead and I cut out the bottom of the gold and then the little coins. And then from plain black cardstock, I cut one of the pots for the pot of gold for our little Lucky Gnome. So those are what you're going to need to cut with the dies. The dies do come with many more dies than that, and you cannot see them on the website. We're just going to be using these ones for this mini album. Okay, so then other supplies you will need chipboard. This is one 8.5 inch by 11 piece of chipboard that I cut into smaller pieces. So from that, you are going to cut your two covers, and they are going to be cut at 5 inches wide by 4 inches high. You're going to need two of those. I went ahead and inked around the edges, so it's all set to go. Then you're going to need two cover reinforcers. Those are cut at 4 inches wide by 4 inches high. I will have all these measurements listed down below, so you're always feel free to pull up those measurements after the video. Then you're going to need a coordinating this is a little strip that's going to run across the front of our mini album. This is cut at 1 1/4 inches high by 4 inches wide. You're going to need, just from watercolor paper, this is a 3-inch diameter circle. If you do not have a circle die, you could just cut a 3-inch by 3-inch square. That would work as well. And then from the papers, we are going to cut one spine decorator piece. This one is cut by 1 inch wide by 4 inches high, and that is the one with the rainbows and the little clovers. And then you're going to cut from that same paper, you're going to cut two covers, front covers. These are going to be cut at 3 7/8 inches wide by 3 7/8 inches high. Two of those are going to go on your outer covers, and they coordinate with the spine. Then you're going to cut two inner covers. It can be these patterns with the little leprechauns and the smaller clovers with smaller rainbows, or you could pick and choose which ones from the pattern pack you would like. These are also cut at 3 7/8 inches by 3 7/8 inches. You need two. These will cover the inner covers. And then you're going to need to cut 3 of your page pages for the inside of your mini album. You're going to pick out 3 patterns. The patterns I picked were the leprechauns, the larger rainbows with the pots of gold, and then the smaller clover with the polka dots behind it. And I cut those at 4 1/4 inches wide by 4 inches high, and I scored them at 1/4 of an inch on the longer side, the 4 1/4 inch side. So then you'll have just like tiny little tab like that. I went ahead and pre-scored all 3 of these, so they're all set to go. You can put them in any order into your mini album once we start assembling that you would like. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the cover first. So you're going to need your two folded cover pieces, the ones that we scored. Remember, this was cut at 5 inches by 4 inches, and we scored at 1 inch on the 5 inch side. So this makes a 4 inch by 4 inch square, and then a 1 inch spine. I went ahead and pre-inked around the edges, and all we're going to do is we're going to add adhesive to the inside of one of those flaps. So I'm just grabbing my adhesive. You could also use double-sided tape if you want. I like the liquid adhesive because it gives you a little bit more room to get things lined up. So just add adhesive all the way to the edge. And then you're going to take your other little piece here, and you're just going to nest it right on top of the other piece to get this spine like this, where it opens and closes like a little book. And you just want to line it up. You don't want to put it right on top of your score line. You want it right next to your score line so that your little pages can still fold. You can always test that by folding it either way and making sure that it works for you and it's not going to get right into that fold line. I'm going to use a brayer tool just to make sure it's pushed down, no bubbles, air bubbles. Okay, so now we have our little main album portion together. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our little pages and our twine. So these are your cover reinforcers. They're 4 inches by 4 inches. There's 2 of them. And we are going to flip this over so that the back of the spine is facing up. And we are going to take our twine. And I like to add 2 pieces. So what I'm going to do is you're going to take your twine. You're going to cut off a piece that is probably about 6 inches. We're going to set that aside because that's going to be for the outside of our charm to tie onto our little album. So I'm going to set that aside. Then the rest of the twine, I am going to take it and I'm going to cut it in half. So I'm just lining it up, cutting it in half. And then I'm taking each of those pieces, folding them in half again, like this. And then the piece that has the ends that are open will be facing out. I'm going to take some liquid adhesive and across the center of our little album here on the top, I'm just adding a nice layer of liquid adhesive into the center. I'm going to take this little piece of the twine and press it down into the adhesive, going about 2/3 across our little album. You need enough that you can tie it afterwards, but you want enough of this across the page so that it doesn't pull out of the album itself. So then you're going to take one of your covers and add adhesive all the way to the back, all the way up to the edges. Make sure you focus extra glue right across the center where that twine is going to be. And then just line it up to the top of your album, right on top of where that twine comes out of the edge like that. And then I'm going to use my brayer tool and just press this down to make sure that glue is evenly distributed. just like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the opposite side. I'm just going to flip this over so I can easily do this with this side facing here. So again, just adding adhesive across the center, then taking my last piece of twine, folding it in half, and then remember your little looped edge is going to go about 2/3 across your little album. Press that down, and then I'm going to take my last album reinforcer, the main cover reinforcer. I'm going to add adhesive to the back of that and place that right on top. And remember to add that extra glue into the center of your little album where the strings are going to be pulling through there. So like right here in the middle, just adding a little bit extra adhesive. Okay, then lining it up just like before, placing it right on top of that cover underneath, and sandwiching those little twine threads in between. I'm going to get my brayer tool and then press this down, making sure the glue is evenly distributed, really pressing down where that twine is so that it seals them into the pages. Okay, so then while we're still here with the cover to the outside, we're going to go ahead and add our decorator panels. So I'm going to be adding this little one here that's a spine decorator piece, and I'm just going to add a little bit of liquid adhesive to the back of that pattern paper. And pressing that down into the center of our spine. Remember, this is the outside of the cover. You can use your little brayer tool to make sure, again, no air bubbles, and it lays nice and flat. And then I'm going to be using the coordinating covers, which were the 3 7/8 by 3 7/8. I'm going to glue those to my outside covers as well. So just adding a thin layer of glue around the outside edge and a little bit across the center, lining that up to my page here, centering it, and then pressing down with my brayer tool. And then same thing on this opposite side, just gluing this down to my album. Lining it up to the center of that, and then I'm going to use the brayer tool again to press that down. Okay, so then when that's all done, we can go ahead and flip this over to the inside part of our little album. And here we're going to be adding those last 3 7/8 by 3 7/8 little mats. We're going to go ahead and glue those to the inside covers. So just like before, add your adhesive and then use the brayer tool to make sure it is nice and flat inside with no air bubbles. So I want this little leprechaun one on the inner cover here, and then the back cover, back inside cover will be those rainbows with the Clover paper. So again, pressing down with the brayer tool. And then here, I'm going to be adding this one. Okay, and then just lining it up. And then you could always add your little photos to the inside of this. Journaling pages would be super cute too. Fun little album to keep track of those little holiday pictures. Okay, so now what we're going to do is you're going to take just a little scrap of paper. This is 1/4 of an inch. You can pick any of your pattern papers. 1/4 of an inch by 4 inches tall. And I'm just going to glue this on this right edge here because I want this spine covered, and we have 3 pages going inside, but you'll be left with a little gap on the edge that has no pattern to it, so that's why we're gluing this down. Remember, you want to go right to the edge but not over your score line. So just lining that up, pressing it down. You can use your brayer tool if you'd like, and that's on that right edge. And now we have our little pages that we had cut. Remember, they have the 1/4 of an inch score line on the side. You're going to put them in the order you want them. So I think I'm going to be doing probably the green clover, just like how I have it here. So I'm going to start with my first page. I'm going to add adhesive to this little tab here. And I'm going to line this up to the center of my spine, lining up that tab edge to where the edge of this meets the score line, but not on top of it. And then I'm going to take my little scoring tool and press this down so it adheres. And then I'm going to press this down and push that score line down so that page folds easily. So just like that. And then you're going to take your next page and we're going to do the same thing, add adhesive to the little 1/4 of an inch tab. And again, we're just going to line it right up to the edge of that previous paper, right there. And then use our little scoring tool to press that down. Okay, and then pressing this down here and pushing that edge down. And then you're going to take your final page and again add adhesive. It is going to overlap this little tab we did a little bit, and that's fine. We just wanted to add that so there's no tiny little sliver of the spine showing where it looks uneven. So again, just lining it right up to the edge of that previous page and pressing it down. And you can see that tiny little sliver of that paper showing through, but it keeps it nice and uniform. Pressing that down, then pressing our page down and reinforcing that score line. And then you have all of your little pages into the center of your album like that. And you have your little ties here where you can tie your little album. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to add the little charm to the outside edge here. So I'm going to take a hole punch. This is my crocodile. I'm going to be using the thinner side, the 1/8 inch hole punch area, but it's up to you. You could use a 1/4 of an inch as well, just this little one here. I am going to open up my album and just go between the pages. You can pick which ones you want where it looks as even as you can, so just lining that up. You can mark it if you feel like you need to. So just lined it up right there on the edge. Press down, have a little hole punch, and then we'll be able to tie our charm to that. So now you're going to take your little charm. You could use a jump ring if you wanted as well. I'm going to take the rest of that 6-inch twine that I left. I cut off of the previous twine, and I'm just going to tie that through and pull that through that little hole punch we just did. And I'm going to just tie a little knot and then a bow And it gives that just that really cute little addition to your memory album. So a little knot and then a little bow. Super easy and super adorable. There we go. And you can trim off the ends if wanted. So now we have our little charm back there and our little album. And now we can start decorating the front of our album. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay this flat as we decorate the front of this. Just because it makes it easier to line everything up. And so we're going to be adding our little coordinating piece here. This I'm going to move this aside for a second so we can go ahead and ink this. I'm going to be using the stencil from the kit, this fun little shamrock pattern. I'm going to be using some washi tape and just taping down my chipboard piece so we can add this little detail without it shifting. If you have a magnetic stencil holder, that works great too. So just pressing that down. And then I'm going to line up my stencil. You can see through it easily to see where your pattern's going to be. And I'm just lining it up like that. I like where that position is. And I'm going to tape down the stencil on the edges so it doesn't shift on me. And tape down this bottom edge. Okay, so then for this part, I'm going to be using a blending brush. You can get down more into the little crevices of the stencil. And I'm just going to be using a green ink. I'm going to be using this one right here, Distress Ink in Lucky Clover. And I'm going to load up my little blending brush and then go right over the stencil with the green through that stencil and start building up that color right onto that stencil there. You want to really load up your blending brush in small circular motions. It's nice and gentle on the stencil and creates that really fun pattern. When we remove the stencil, it's going to be a lot darker through this onto the chipboard than what it looks like over the stencil, so just keep that in mind. I'm just going to go across this whole thing. This would make really great pattern paper too. Just getting in all of those little details. Okay, and when you're happy with your blend, then we can go ahead and we can remove the stencil. And you can see that gorgeous pattern right there, transferred right through. Okay, then we can go ahead and we can remove our chipboard from the washi tape. And I'm just going to take that ink on a blending sponge, that same ink, that Lucky Clover. I'm just going to go right around the edges of the chipboard with that green. Just like that. Okay, so then we are going to add this to the front of our album. Let me clean up this ink so we don't transfer it to the rest of our album. I'm bringing the album back over. Let me dry this off. I don't want to get the pages all wet. There we go. Okay, so now we have our little album here, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to adhere this little Clover strip decorator piece to the front of our album, and I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive for this. You could use double-sided tape if you wanted. I'm just going to line this up right into the center. And press that down. And And use that little brayer tool to make sure that there's no glue that's missed underneath there and it's nice and flat and doesn't warp. Okay, so now that we are done with that, we are going to start adding the next layer. We have that little circle that we cut out, and we're going to add that. So I'm going to set this aside again, and we are going to ink blend onto our little circle. So I'm going to use that same washi tape and just press this little circle down. And we're going to use that stencil again, and we're going to add some really, really fun details to this. Move this up so you can see it a little bit better. Move those up out of the way. Okay, so now we have our stencil, and I'm going to add a grass pattern down here to the bottom first. You can see this really fun little grass edge. I'm going to decide which area and how high up I want this little grass border to be, and tape that down. And then I'm going to take, since this is pretty close to the edge of the shamrock area, I'm going to tape right across the top of that with the washi tape and press that down just so I don't accidentally get any of my blending ink up into the shamrock area. And then I'm going to take my same little blending brush with the Lucky Clover, and I'm just going to blend this right across the bottom in small circular motions on the bottom of our little circle here, adding this grass pattern. I'm using the Lucky Clover because I want a bright, vibrant green. So I'm going to go across the whole thing with the Lucky Clover, get it really nice and saturated, and then I'm going to be pulling through some blue onto this to make it a really vibrant green. Okay, so there we go with the Lucky Clover. Now I'm going to switch to my blue pattern here, my blue ink. I'm going to be using the Distress Oxide and Salty Ocean and my blue blending brush, loading that up and then just going along that bottom edge with the blue. It's going to make a nice vibrant green and give a little bit of variation to this grass so it's not just all a flat green. Okay, and then once you do that, you can remove your stencil from this bottom portion. You can see we have that really fun grass pattern. And now I'm going to be adding some cloud details. So now we have the top edge of our stencil, and that's what's really fun about this, is it's a builder stencil. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to tape off just that area, just like I did before, so it doesn't transfer through any of that pattern off that top edge. And then I'm going to start adding my little cloud border. So I'm going to be blending across the top edge here. I'm using the same Salty Ocean I used before. I'm using a blending sponge this time. And I'm just going to do small circular motions and go right along the edge of that cloud border. This is really fun for scene building. Okay, so then I'm going to remove that, and we have that fun first layer of cloud border, and then I'm going to shift this a little bit. Like, let's see, maybe, yeah, I like it like that. And then I'm going to go right along that top edge, keeping close to the edge because I don't want to cover up that cloud behind it. You just want to give the impression that you have this little fluffy cloud edge in front of this cloud behind. Okay, then we're going to remove that, and then we're going to shift it again and do a third layer. So again, just load up your little blending sponge, small circular motions right across the top of that little cloud edge. And there we go, just remove that, and you have this really fun little cloud border, grass border. Your whole scene can be built just with this stencil. You don't have to do anything super tricky. It's super fast and easy, but looks complicated. Okay, so now what we're going to do is since this was distress ink, I'm just going to activate the ink with some little water droplets. I just have an old toothbrush and some water on it. I'm going to spritz it right off camera just a couple of times and let that water set for a moment. And then I'm going to dab up those water droplets to get that little texture. See the little texture that shows up from the water droplets. You could do it a couple of times if you decide you want more texture, or leave it like that if you're happy with it. Okay, then let me just clean off this ink again. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we can add this circle to the center of our album. So here's our little album here. Just set that down. And then I'm going to use foam tape so this is raised a little bit. So I'm just going to take some foam tape, adding it to the back of this little circle. And you can see I'm just kind of keeping it across the middle, not going all the way to the edges. I'm going to line this up into the center. Making sure my grass border is even with the bottom of the album. Pressing that down. Then we have our little sentiment. I'm going to go ahead and add that. I'm going to add 2 layers of foam tape so it sticks up just a little bit taller. And then our circle. Okay, Lucky and I Gnome It. And I want to line this up to that edge there. Just making sure. You may have to trim the very edge of this or not have it go all the way to the edge just so it doesn't layer over this circle. You want enough room that it lifts up over the circle but not on top of it. So lining it up with that corner edge of the bottom mat. There we go. Okay, then we can add our little character here. I'm going to add 2 layers of foam tape behind him. Because I want him the highest, the most raised out of the album, so he stands out. I'm going to stand him up on this corner. Just like that, and press him down. Super, super cute. Okay, so now we're going to ink blend our rainbow and our little cloud and add that to our album as well. So I'm going to set this aside again. We're going to do a little bit more ink blending. Okay, so remember how we have our little pot of gold here we have to assemble, and we have our cloud and our rainbow pieces. So we're going to finish assembling these and ink blending them. The easiest one to do is our little cloud. I'm just going to take that same salty ocean and just ink up that bottom edge of our little cloud there with the blue, and that one is now done. For our little pot of gold, we're just going to take the little pot of gold there. We're going to take the little coins, like the base coins. You don't have to cut all the individual coins. You could just do just this little top portion if you wanted. I'm just going to take a little bit of liquid adhesive and glue this to the top of our little pot of gold there. And just gluing that right to that top edge. And just lining it up. Okay, and then you can take the little gold pieces and start adding them on if you want, or just leave it as is. I like that little layered look of the little gold pieces, so I'm going to add 2 or 3 at a time. So just like that, just adding glue to each one of those little edges. And then I'm going to take my little tweezers and grab these little guys and add them. Okay, let's get these little ones. And just adding them right on top of where those little layers are. Super easy, but it gives that little fun 3D look. You could also do this in like glitter cardstock, would be really pretty. And you can add as many of these little coins as you want. You don't have to layer all the areas if you want. Totally up to you. Got this little one here. And then I've got another one here, and then I'm going to layer just a couple over the top. There, and then I'm just going to add 2 more across the top there. So I'm going to get my little glue. And the easiest way is to just add your glue right on top, and then put the coins on top of that. So 2 little pieces there, and then 1 more. All right, there we go. There's our little pot of gold. You can always use a little gel pen if you want and add like a little line and a dot. Just gives an extra little detail to that. Totally up to you. Oh, and then we have our little handle. So for the handle, what I like to do for this is I am going to take some metallic wax. This is the brushed iron. You could also use just a silver ink pad. I'm just going to use my finger and just add a little bit of this to the outside edge of that handle. It makes it look shimmery, silver, and gives that little vintage look. Super easy to do, but just adds that extra little detail. And then I'm just going to glue that to the top front of my little pot of gold here into the center. I'm just going to add a little dot of glue. And then I'm going to take the little handle and just add it right there to the center. Super, super cute little detailed little pot of gold. So now we have our pot of gold in the cloud done. Now we're going to go ahead and ink blend our little shamrocks here. And to do that, I'm going to be using Distress ink in 2 different colors, Twisted Citron and Lucky Clover. And I'm going to first get my little blending sponge, and I'm going to add just a thin layer of the Twisted Citron across both of these. Just like that. Giving that base layer of that bright, vibrant green. I'm going to do that to the second shamrock. Just a quick layer. Across the base of that. Okay, and then when you're happy with the base color, then you can switch to your Lucky Clover. And I'm just going to go right along the edges in small circular motions to build up that tone, that green tone, and give a little bit more dimension. So just like that, I'm going to do the same thing with this other shamrock, just going along the edges, keeping the center still that lighter green. There we go, and then you can always go along the edges with that same darker green. Okay. clean off that green ink. Then what you can do if you want an extra little detail that I like doing is, since it's distress ink, I will take the little toothbrush again and just quickly spritz these with some water to activate that ink to give those little water droplet effect. So let it sit for just a second, and then use a little tissue to dab those up, or a rag. And then you have that little texture there. So now our little clovers are done. And now onto the rainbow. So you just want to make sure that your pieces, you have them going in the correct order. Let's see, that's our biggest one. And this rainbow doesn't have all of the stripes. You have almost all of them. You have red, orange, yellow, green, blue. So this is a little bit of a modified rainbow. We're going to start with our red, which will be the outer rainbow band. And you could just cut these from the various colors and just leave it as is, or you can distress ink them like I'm going to do. So I'm going to be using Candied Apple for the red stripe, and just a blending sponge, and just like before, I'm going to do a thin layer of the color across the whole thing, and then I'm going to build up saturation on the edges. I'm going to do the same thing for each one of these color bands, and this was all cut from watercolor paper, so it can really hold that ink, and it doesn't warp as we're blending more layers, which is nice. So there's one band, there's our red band, and you're going to want to make sure you clean up your ink in between each one so that you don't color transfer to your next layer of your rainbow. So I'm going to move that to the top. My next color is going to be orange. So I'm going to grab the orange stripe, bring that down, and move on to this color is going to be carved pumpkin. And the same thing as before. Add your layer across the whole thing, and then build up the edges with more saturation of that color. There we go, and then same thing on this opposite side. Okay, there's our orange. Move that to the side, clean off your area of ink. And now we're to yellow. And for this one, I'm going to be using Squeezed Lemonade Distress Ink and a blending sponge. And again, just adding the base color across the whole thing, and then building up that color on those edges. There we go. Adding a little bit more color to those edges. There we go. So yellow is done. Now we're to green. And we're going to be using the same colors we used for the shamrocks. So Twisted Citron, and then I'll be switching to the Lucky Clover for the edges of this green band. So here we go, Twisted Citron. And again, just adding a thin layer across the whole thing of the Twisted Citron. Oops, be careful not to bend the little edges there. But even if so, we're going to be gluing it down so it will still lay flat. It won't matter. So right here, just getting those edges. There we go, and now we're going to switch to our Lucky Clover to add that deeper green. And I'm just going to get the edges with this deeper green. Just like that. Okay, and then put that to our rainbow up above. And then we're going to move on to Salty Ocean, which is the last of our little color bands for this rainbow. Cleaning off that green ink so I don't transfer it. And now we're to Salty Ocean and our blending sponge. And again, a thin layer of the blue. Focus on the edges. Once you get the base layer to how you want it, see, we're building up all of that color on those edges and leaving that kind of shine in the center of the rainbow on the upper edge. Okay, and then when you're happy with that, we are done with the rainbow. Clean off your mat one last time, and we're going to bring our little album and we're going to add these last details to our album, and then we will be finished with this project. Just clean off the mat, and here is our album, just like before. Moving this into the center, we're going to go ahead and start adding our little rainbow. So I'm going to take this little outer ring first and add my liquid adhesive to this back edge. Okay, I'm going to nest this underneath that little sentiment there and behind our little gnome, just like that, and press that down. And then we're going to take our next one, which was the orange, and again add some liquid adhesive to the back of it. And we may have to lift up our gnome and then re-put him down after we get this rainbow adhered. I think I probably am going to do that. Let's see, I'm just going to twist him off. And we can add those little rainbow stripes and then put them back on. Okay, so just adding these. They do line up perfectly. I got that second one a little bit crooked, but that's okay, no big deal. Because we're going to have the little pot of gold layered underneath it and then the cloud and the gnome covering. So then just add those little bands. And now our green band. There we go. And then last but not least, we have our little blue band. Just like that. Now we're going to take our little cloud, we're going to add it up onto one layer of foam tape, and our pot of gold onto one layer. So I'm going to do my pot of gold first, just adding a layer of foam tape behind it, and I'm just going to put that right over the edge here where that little rainbow is coming out. Just like that, pressing it down, and then up here we're going to add our little cloud, so we're just going to layer that right like that with a little layer of foam tape, just one, adding that right to the back, and pressing that down with the blue edge facing down just like that, off the edge just a little bit. There we go. And now we can re-add our little gnome. So we're just going to layer him right here. He still has the 2 layers of foam tape. Just pressing him right down. There we go. And then we have our little clovers. We have 2 of them. And we can just nest those with some liquid adhesive underneath those corner edges. So this one I'm just going to nest right here under this edge. And then this other one, let's see, I think I'm going to nest right on this opposite edge. And then we have our little sequin mix, and we can add just a couple of little sequins to our album to give just a tiny bit, a little bit of sparkle. Just going to pour some into our little tray here. Just like that, and we can take a couple and just kind of add them for a little extra sparkle to our little album here. So I think one like right there. I like to do these in 3s and odd numbers, so like a 3 or 5. So I'm going to do 3. I'm going to pick different sizes. This one, I think I'm going to glue on the clover itself. There we go. And then I'll add one more. I'm going to add a gold one. Let's see, a really tiny gold one. I think there's these little gold flowers that are really cute. I think I'm going to add one of those to the pot of gold, like one of the coins, probably on this little edge here. Add the little glue dot, and then I'll grab one of those little, drop that one, let me get a different one, a little star. And there we go. And there we go. Alright, and then your little album is all done. Look how cute this little guy is. All ready for your memories. And then you can just tie it. You've got all of your little pages. Super cute, fun, and ready for your photos. And there we go. I can't wait to see what you guys make. Please be sure to share all around and tag us. We would love to see what you create with your kit. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you guys again soon. Bye.